Welcome back to Reddit Whispers. 4 years. It's a strange amount of time when you look back on it. It's long enough to build a life, to intertwine your roots so deeply with someone else, that you can't imagine a world where they aren't a part of your landscape. It's long enough for inside jokes to form, for routines to become rituals, for the scent of their shampoo to become synonymous with the feeling of home. We had that. We had our rhythm, a cadence that was uniquely ours, built over 1,460 days of ups and downs. But looking back now, with the clarity that only catastrophic failure can provide, I see that the majority of those downs, the deep, gut-wrenching valleys we had to climb out of, were almost always dug by the shovel of her own insecurities. She was a cartographer of imaginary disasters, constantly plotting new points of betrayal on a map only she could see. Her insecurities weren't just a part of her. They were the scaffolding upon which our entire relationship was built, and it was a structure doomed from the start. It's a heavy thing to love someone who doesn't love themselves. It's like trying to fill a bucket with a hole in the bottom. You can pour all of your affection, your reassurance, your loyalty into them, but it never fills up. It just drains out, leaving them just as empty as before and you exhausted from the effort. Her insecurities were a phantom third person in our relationship, a ghost that was always whispering in her ear, telling her she wasn't good enough, that I was destined to leave, that every shadow held a threat. And I, in my foolish, patient love, spent 4 years trying to fight a ghost. It started small, as these things often do. A question here, a comment there. If I mentioned a female coworker, her eyes would narrow almost imperceptibly. Oh, what's she like? The emphasis, so subtle yet laden with suspicion. It wasn't curiosity, it was interrogation disguised as conversation. Soon it escalated. If I had to work on a project with another woman, it became a week-long ordeal. It would start with a coldness, a deliberate distance that I was expected to notice and question. Then came the barrage. Are you texting her after work? Let me see your phone. Why did you have to work late? Were you really at the office? I remember one time we were working on a major presentation, and my partner Sarah and I were pulling 12-hour days. My girlfriend knew this. I was transparent to a fault, sending her pictures of the whiteboard, complaining about the stale coffee, doing everything I could to make her feel included, to show her there was nothing to fear. But her fear wasn't based on reality. It was a creature of her own making. One night I came home, utterly drained, and she was waiting for me, her arms crossed, her face a mask of cold fury. She'd somehow found Sarah's social media profile and had spent her evening scrolling through years of photos, constructing a narrative of infidelity from vacation pictures and birthday posts. It didn't matter that Sarah was happily married, a fact I had mentioned multiple times. In my girlfriend's mind, every smile in a photo was a secret invitation, every friendly comment a coded message of desire. The argument that followed was volcanic, a torrent of accusations so baseless and bizarre that I felt like I was losing my grip on reality itself. The exhaustion from work combined with the emotional onslaught was crushing. That's the thing about being constantly accused of cheating. It's a profound psychological torment. You start to feel guilty even when you're innocent, second-guessing every interaction, every word, just to avoid triggering another explosion. You live in a constant state of preemptive defense. The texting was a whole other battlefield. In her world, a text message wasn't a form of communication. It was a loyalty test. If I didn't reply within a certain, unspecified time frame, the accusations would begin to fly. I could be in a meeting, driving, or simply have my phone in another room, and my screen would light up with a rapid-fire succession of messages. Where are you? Who are you with? Why aren't you answering me? You're with another woman, aren't you? It was a suffocating paranoia. I developed a nervous twitch, a Pavlovian anxiety every time my phone buzzed. I started sending her pictures of my surroundings as proof of my whereabouts, turning my life into a piece of evidence for a crime I wasn't committing. It was humiliating, but it felt like the only way to keep the peace. The peace, however, was always temporary. The most absurd and revealing incident, the one that should have been the final red flag, was about a simple act of kindness. I had a female partner at work, different from Sarah, who was going through a tough time. A single mom, her car had broken down, and she'd spent her last few dollars on the tow truck, leaving her with no money for lunch. Seeing her distress, I did what I thought any decent human being would do. I bought her breakfast, a bagel and a coffee. It was a $10 gesture of collegial support. I didn't even think to hide it because why would I? It was a non-event. But I mentioned it to my girlfriend that evening casually, and her reaction was nothing short of explosive. She didn't just get angry, she shattered. In her twisted logic, buying another woman food was an unforgivable act of romantic betrayal. It was proof of a secret affair, a gesture so intimate in her mind that it was tantamount to a confession. She screamed, she cried, she threw a pillow at my head, and then she broke up with me, over a bagel. We spent a week apart, a week where I was racked with a bizarre mix of anger and confusion. I hadn't done anything wrong, yet I was being punished. She eventually came back, of course, but the price of reconciliation was my apology. I had to apologize for being kind. I had to promise to never disrespect her like that again. And like a fool, I did. Because I loved her and I believed that underneath the layers of fear and jealousy, there was the woman I had fallen for. That incident encapsulates the 4 years perfectly. Her insecurity dictated the terms of our reality. Living next to Mexico was another constant source of conflict. For most people, it's a convenience, a place for a quick getaway, for good food and culture. For her, it was a den of inequity, a place where my only purpose for visiting would be to go to brothels. If I ever mentioned going with friends, she would spiral into a rage, her imagination running wild with lurid details of my supposed debauchery. It was another fantasy she'd constructed, another way to frame me as the potential villain and her as the long-suffering victim. The arguments were draining, a circular logic of accusation and denial that went nowhere. And this is where I have to be honest with myself, with anyone listening. I never once raised my voice to her. I prided myself on that. I never yelled, never matched her volume. But that doesn't mean I was a saint. There's a point where constant provocation can wear down even the most patient soul. When you're constantly defending yourself against baseless accusations, when your character is relentlessly attacked, something inside you can snap. I'm not proud of it, but in the heat of those arguments, provoked and pushed to my absolute limit, I would say very mean things. I would use my words as weapons, aiming for the very insecurities that were fueling her attacks. I knew her weak spots, and in my anger and frustration I would press on them. It was a defense mechanism, a toxic one. I was trying to make her feel the way she was making me feel, small, hurt, and misunderstood. It never worked, of course. It only ever added more fuel to the fire and left me feeling like a monster afterward. How did I put up with this for 4 years? I honestly don't know. Maybe it's because the good times, when her insecurities were dormant, were genuinely good. Maybe I'm a codependent fool who mistakes the need to be needed for love. Maybe I believed I could fix her, that my love could be the cure for her self-loathing. It's a classic mistake, the savior complex. You see the brokenness in someone and think you can be the one to put them back together. But you can't. People have to fix themselves. All you do is cut your hands on their shattered pieces. So that's the backstory. 4 years of walking on eggshells, of navigating a minefield of irrational fears, of being the sole defendant in a kangaroo court where I was always guilty. It was a pressure cooker, and I was the one simmering inside, just waiting for the inevitable explosion that would blow it all apart. I just never imagined it would happen at 5 o'clock in the morning, on a deserted off-ramp, in the surreal glow of a McDonald's sign. That's where the illusion finally shattered, where the ghost I'd been fighting for 4 years finally showed its true face, and it was attached to a complete stranger driving my girlfriend's car. The gym was my sanctuary. It was the one place, the one time of day that was unequivocally mine. 5 in the morning, the world is still quiet, still holds the potential of a new day before the chaos sets in. The air has a crispness to it, a clean slate. For me, Heading to the gym before work wasn't just about physical fitness. It was a mental and emotional reset. It was the hour and a half where my phone was in a locker, where the only demands on my attention were the weight on the bar and the rhythm of my own breathing. It was a space free from accusations, free from the need to justify my existence or my whereabouts. It was my fortress of solitude. On that particular morning, the routine was no different. The alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., a jarring but familiar sound in the deep silence of the house. I moved in the darkness, a well-practiced choreography of grabbing my gym clothes, chugging a glass of water, and slipping out the door without a sound. The drive was automatic, my mind still in that liminal space between sleep and full consciousness. The streets were empty, bathed in the orange glow of the streetlights. It was peaceful. I was on the freeway, my exit approaching, my thoughts turning to my workout plan, shoulders and back day. And that's when I saw it. An SUV, a dark gray model, was ahead of me, signaling to take the same off-ramp. I didn't think anything of it at first. It was a common vehicle, thousands of them on the road. But as I followed it down the curve of the ramp, something flickered in my subconscious, a sense of familiarity. It had the same shape, the same silhouette as hers. I dismissed it. I was being paranoid, letting her constant suspicion infect my own mind. She should be at home, in bed. She didn't have to work until later, and her son was with his father for the night. There was no reason for her to be out at this hour. The SUV ahead of me slowed, its blinker clicking, and it turned into the entrance of a 24-hour McDonald's. As it passed under the bright, artificial glare of the golden arches, the light caught the driver's side of the vehicle, and my world tilted on its axis. My heart didn't just drop, it plummeted. It was hers. There was no doubt. There, illuminated for a fraction of a second, was the distinctive spiderweb of cracks on the rear bumper from where she'd backed into a pole a few months ago. And more damning, the long, jagged scratch along the driver's side door, a battle scar from a misjudgment in a tight parking garage. I'd seen that damage every single day for the past year. My mind went blank. The car behind me honked, and I realized I was just sitting there at the green light, paralyzed. I snapped back to reality, my hands gripping the steering wheel. Without thinking, my body acting on pure, sickening instinct, I made a sharp right turn into the same shopping center. My mind was a whirlwind of denial and desperate rationalization. Maybe her car was stolen. Maybe she lent it to a friend in an emergency. There had to be an explanation. There had to be. The shopping center was a large, sprawling complex, and the McDonald's was at one end. I drove slowly, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I circled around the back of the building, my headlights cutting through the pre-dawn gloom. And then I saw the SUV, parked away from the drive-through lane, tucked into a poorly lit corner of the lot. As I drew closer, my blood ran cold. She was in the passenger seat, and there was a man I'd never seen before in the driver's seat. The rationalizations evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard certainty that settled in the pit of my stomach like a block of ice. I couldn't make out their faces clearly, just their outlines in the dim light. But I knew her silhouette as well as I knew my own. My first impulse was to speed over, block them in, and confront them right then and there. To demand an explanation, to unleash the storm of confusion and rage that was building inside me. But some instinct for self-preservation held me back. I didn't know who this guy was. I didn't know what I was walking into, so I did something else. I kept driving, completing the loop around the shopping center, my mind racing, trying to process the impossible image I had just seen. My hands were shaking. I needed a better look. I needed to be absolutely sure, to burn the image into my brain so she couldn't deny it later. I drove around again, this time approaching from the front. I timed it so I would pass directly in front of their parked vehicle. This time they saw me. As my headlights swept across their windshield, I saw their faces clearly, and they saw mine. The look on her face was not one of surprise. It was pure, unadulterated shock, a deer-in-the-headlights terror. Her eyes were wide, her mouth hung open. The man beside her had a similar look of panicked confusion. It was a moment that stretched into an eternity, the three of us locked in a tableau of discovery and guilt. Her reaction was immediate and utterly damning. She ducked. She physically threw herself down in the passenger seat, trying to hide from my view, a desperate, childish gesture that screamed guilt louder than any confession. In that instant, without a single word exchanged, I knew everything. The years of accusations, the jealousy, the paranoia, it wasn't about her insecurity. It was projection. She was accusing me of the very thing she was doing. My rage was suddenly sharp and focused. I pulled my phone out, my thumb fumbling with the screen, and I called her. I watched, my car idling just a few feet from theirs, as the interior of her SUV lit up with the incoming call. And I saw the man, this stranger who was driving her vehicle at 5 in the morning, pick up her phone. He looked at the screen, then looked back at me, his face a mixture of panic and defiance. He didn't answer. He just showed her the screen. That was the final violation. That was the moment that broke something inside me. They sped off after that. The man threw the SUV into reverse, tires squealing on the pavement, and shot out of the parking lot, blowing past the stop sign and onto the main road. I tried to follow them, my mind a red haze of adrenaline and betrayal. I whipped my car around and gunned it, but by the time I got back to the frontage road, they were already hitting the on-ramp to the freeway, disappearing into the sparse morning traffic. They were gone. I was left alone in the empty parking lot, the phantom glow of their taillights burned into my retinas. I sat there for a long time, the engine humming, the silence deafening. What do you do in a moment like that? Where do you go? I drove to her house. I don't know why. Maybe I needed to see if the lie would continue. As I predicted, her SUV wasn't there, but something else was. A black Jeep was parked in front of her house. I recognized it immediately. It belonged to her son's nurse. This was a crucial detail, a small, solid fact in a world that had just dissolved into chaos. I knew right then that the nurse was there. This piece of information filed itself away in my mind. The thought of being that crazy boyfriend crossed my mind. The idea of parking down the street, hiding in the shadows, waiting for her to come home so I could catch her in the lie was tempting. The vengeful part of me, the part that had been wounded so deeply, wanted that dramatic confrontation. But I couldn't do it. I had to maintain some shred of dignity, some semblance of control when everything felt so out of control. I wouldn't let her reduce me to that, so I went to the gym. I walked into that familiar space, the smell of chalk and disinfectant, the clang of iron, and I felt like a ghost. I went through the motions of my workout, but my body felt disconnected from my mind. As I sat there between sets, the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, heavy ache. I picked up my phone and sent her a text. I didn't yell, I didn't accuse, I just stated a fact. I saw you, and I know you're not at home. I hit send. And then I waited. For 30 agonizing minutes, I waited for the reply. 30 minutes where every possible scenario played out in my head. 30 minutes that felt like a lifetime. And then my phone buzzed. It was her, acting as if nothing had happened, as if I hadn't just seen her with another man, as if my world hadn't just been completely destroyed. The lie was about to begin, and I was ready for it. The buzz of the phone on the bench beside me was an electric shock to my system. For 30 minutes, I had been suspended in a state of surreal calm, the rhythmic clang of weights around me a strange counterpoint to the silent screaming in my head. I had replayed the scene in the McDonald's parking lot 100 times, each pass etching the details deeper into my memory. The specific scratch on her SUV's door, the wide-eyed panic on her face, her pathetic attempt to hide, the stranger picking up her phone as I called. These were undeniable truths, anchors of reality in a sea of betrayal. I braced myself for the incoming message, expecting a tirade, a confession, or perhaps even silence. What I got was so much worse. It was a masterpiece of nonchalance, a text message written as if it were any other Tuesday morning. "Hey, you just woke up. Everything okay?" The audacity of it was breathtaking. It was a calculated attempt to seize the narrative, to pretend that my previous text was the ramblings of a confused or delirious man. She was trying to frame my reality as a dream, a figment of my imagination. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed my reply, my voice now direct and stripped of any ambiguity. "I told you I caught you, don't play dumb." The response was almost instantaneous, and with it, the first layer of her elaborate deception began to unfold. She denied it, of course, but not just a simple denial. It was a detailed, constructed narrative designed to make me feel insane. "What are you talking about?" she wrote. "You must have seen my friend and her husband. They borrowed my vehicle for the morning. Their car is in the shop. I'm at home, where I've been all night. I couldn't go anywhere even if I wanted to." She wasn't just lying. She was building an alibi brick by meticulous brick. She even added a layer of sympathy to it, a detail designed to make me feel like a heel for even questioning her. "My son's nurse called out sick, so I'm stuck here watching him. I'm even babysitting my friend's kids as a favor since they had to use my car for their emergency." It was a brilliant performance, a multi-act play of deception. She was Miss Innocent, the dutiful mother and helpful friend, and I was the paranoid, accusatory boyfriend, seeing ghosts in the pre-dawn light. But she had made two critical errors. She had underestimated what I had seen and overestimated my willingness to be deceived any longer. This is when I calmly and methodically began to dismantle her world of lies. "That's funny," I typed, a cold satisfaction spreading through me. "Because when I passed by your house on my way to the gym, the nurse's black Jeep was parked right outside. So unless she has a clone, she wasn't sick." I watched the three little dots appear and disappear as she typed, deleted, and retyped her response. The first crack in her story had appeared. Then I delivered the second blow. "And another thing. Why the hell would your friend, whose perfectly good car is just in the shop, leave it behind and take your SUV? The same SUV whose registration stickers are expired, something you were just complaining about last week. It makes zero sense." The logic was undeniable, and I knew it. I had her cornered with facts. The response that came back was a pivot. The specific lies had failed, so she shifted to broad, sweeping dismissals. "This is just a big misunderstanding," she pleaded. "You're twisting things." A bunch of other nonsense followed, a word salad of confusion and deflection. She then tried to appeal to a higher power, a tactic she often used when she had no logical ground to stand on. "God knows I wasn't there and that you are wrong," she texted. It was a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to use faith as a shield for her faithlessness. It was then that I truly understood the depth of her denial. This was the kind of person you could catch standing over a dead body, holding the bloody knife, and she would still deny it, still try to convince you that you were the one who was seeing things. Her entire identity seemed to be built around this Miss Innocent routine, where she was perpetually the victim and I was always the aggressor, the source of all our problems. When the factual denials crumbled and the divine appeals failed, she shifted to her most insidious and damaging weapon, gaslighting. This was her specialty, an art form she had perfected over our 4 years together. She stopped trying to refute the evidence and started attacking the observer. She tried to invalidate my reality itself. The accusations came in a furious, almost frantic succession, each one more idiotic and insulting than the last. "You were drinking last night, weren't you?" she sent. This was a ludicrous claim. She knew better than anyone that I was a teetotaler. I hadn't had a drop of alcohol in over a decade. It was a foundational part of who I was. Accusing me of being drunk was not just a lie. It was an attack on my character, an attempt to paint me as an unreliable narrator of my own life. Before I could even respond to that absurdity, the next one came. "It's the pills you're taking that are making you do this." Pills? What pills? I don't take any medication, not even aspirin. The accusation was so far-fetched, so completely divorced from reality that it was almost comical. It was the desperate flailing of a drowning person, grabbing at anything to pull me down with her. Then she tried to invent a motive for my attack on her. "I know what this is about," she typed. "It's because you got into that fight with someone at work yesterday. You're just taking it out on me." This was another fabrication pulled from thin air. She knew I had been at home with her the previous night. There was no fight. There was no one from work. She was just throwing spaghetti at the wall, hoping something would stick. But then she went for the jugular. She decided to weaponize my past, to take something sacred and deeply personal and twist it into a tool for her manipulation. "The war messed up your head," she wrote. "I am an OIF veteran. My service is a part of me, a part that carries both pride and scars." For her to use that, to suggest that my perception of reality was flawed because of my experiences defending my country, was the lowest of blows. It was a profound betrayal, an attempt to use my trauma to discredit me and excuse her own deceit. The gaslighting symphony continued. "We're having a language barrier problem," she claimed. "I can't express myself the way I want to because my main language is Spanish." This was perhaps the most insulting lie of all. I am fluent in Spanish. We spoke it together constantly. She knew this. We had built a life in two languages, and now she was pretending one of them was a barrier, a convenient excuse for her inability to form a coherent, truthful sentence. And finally came the armchair diagnosis, the ultimate act of psychological warfare. "You're being bipolar," she texted. "You always get mad like this." She was taking my righteous anger, my completely justified reaction to her constant, baseless accusations of cheating over the years, and labeling it as a mental illness. My anger wasn't a symptom of bipolar disorder. It was the symptom of being in a relationship with a manipulative, gaslighting liar. She had provoked this anger for years with her suffocating jealousy. And now, when I finally had undeniable proof of her own infidelity, she was trying to frame my reaction as the problem. At this point in the exchange, something inside me shifted. The pain and the shock were still there, but they were being eclipsed by a cold, hard clarity. I wasn't just dealing with an insecure girlfriend. I was dealing with a person who had a fundamentally broken relationship with the truth. After I had systematically busted every single one of her lies with cold, hard facts, she stopped denying it. She stopped acknowledging that I caught her with another man at all. The subject was dropped as if it had never happened. The conversation had reached a dead end of her making. Her elaborate web of lies had been burned away, and all that was left was the ugly truth. But she had one more card to play. If she couldn't deny the act, she would simply shift the blame. It wasn't her fault, you see. It was mine. The moment she ran out of lies, the entire dynamic of our conversation shifted. The frantic energy of denial was replaced by something colder, more calculated. She had been caught, her alibis were in ruins, and her gaslighting attempts had failed to destabilize my reality. A normal person in this situation might have shown remorse, offered an apology, or at the very least accepted the finality of being discovered. But she was not a normal person. She was a master of manipulation, and when one strategy failed, she simply moved to the next phase of her playbook, blame shifting. She stopped acknowledging the man in the car, the 5 a.m. rendezvous, any of it. It was as if that part of the morning had been erased from her history. Instead, she began to build a new case, a retroactive justification for her behavior, and I, according to this new narrative, was the true villain of our story. "This is your fault," the text read. "Our relationship was already ruined." I stared at the screen, baffled. My fault? How could this possibly be my fault? The explanation that followed was a stunning work of fiction, a testament to her ability to twist reality to suit her needs. The proof of my supposed betrayal, the event that had apparently driven her into the arms of another man, was a single phone call that had happened weeks ago. My daughter's mom had called me once while we were out together one day. We hadn't been together in 7 years. We co-parented, and that was the extent of our relationship. The call was brief, logistical, something about a school schedule. It was a 5-minute conversation, completely innocuous. But in my girlfriend's mind, this call was the smoking gun. According to her, this one phone call was undeniable proof that I was messing around with my ex. "You're taking it out on me," she accused, followed by a torrent of other dumb stuff, a deluge of paranoid fantasies and baseless connections that made no logical sense. It was a desperate, transparent attempt to deflect her own guilt by painting me as the original sinner. If she could convince herself and me that I had cheated first, then her actions weren't a betrayal, they were a reaction. It was the classic cheater's blame game. That was it for me. That was the final nail in the coffin. The lies, the gaslighting, the betrayal, I might have eventually processed those. But the complete and utter refusal to take an ounce of responsibility, the malicious attempt to frame me as the guilty party, that was something I could not forgive. It showed me who she truly was, a person incapable of accountability. She ended her tirade by blocking me. It was a coward's move, a way to get the last word in without having to face any rebuttal, but she had made a critical miscalculation. She seemed to believe that by blocking my number, she was cutting me out of her life on her terms. She forgot about the tangled web of our shared finances, a web where I held all the strings. A cold, quiet resolve settled over me. There was no more anger, no more pain, just a grim sense of purpose. It was time to untangle myself from her life, piece by piece. The first thing I did was log into my phone account. Her line was under my name on my family plan. With a few clicks, I suspended her service. Her phone, the very device she had used to coordinate her affair and then to lie to me, was now a useless brick. Next, I thought about the gym membership. I was paying for it. We used to go together back when I thought we were a team. I logged into the gym's portal and canceled her membership, effective immediately. Then I remembered the eyebrow appointment she had been so excited about. She had it scheduled for the next day, a little bit of pampering she was looking forward to. I had prepaid for it as a gift. I called the salon, explained the situation, and canceled the payment. They were understanding. These were small things, but they were symbolic. They were the severing of financial ties, the reclaiming of my resources. But the real masterstroke, the piece de resistance of this whole sorry affair, involved a credit card. She had a credit card that I paid on every month. The card itself was in her name, which gave her a sense of ownership and independence. She didn't know the truth. While the plastic might have had her name on it, everything else, the account information, the registered email address, the contact phone number, the online login, was under my info. I had set it up that way for convenience years ago, and she had never questioned it. With a quiet sense of finality, I logged into the credit card account. I didn't cancel it. That would have sent an immediate alert. Instead, I simply locked the card. It was a subtle move, a digital tripwire she wouldn't see until she walked right into it. And she walked right into it. I didn't find out what happened next until a few days later, when one of her friends, who was sympathetic to my situation, called me. The story she told was almost poetic in its karmic justice. My ex, in an apparent attempt to celebrate her newfound freedom and flaunt her new man, had decided to go out for a lavish dinner. She took the other guy, the jobless winner from the McDonald's parking lot, and her 2 children to Papadoc's, a nice seafood restaurant. They ordered big. Lobster, steaks, appetizers, drinks for the adults. She was putting on a show, playing the part of a woman who was doing just fine, better than ever, in fact. Her friend told me she was likely trying to get the last laugh, spending my money one last time. They racked up a massive bill, around $250. Then came the moment of truth. She confidently handed the waiter the credit card, the one she believed was her financial ace in the hole. The waiter returned a few moments later, a polite but firm expression on his face. The card was declined. She tried it again. Declined. Her friend said you could see the panic starting to set in. She had no other way to pay. The winner she was cheating on me with was jobless and had no money on him. And she, having lived off my income for so long, had no money either. There she was, trapped in a fancy restaurant with her 2 kids and her broke new man, facing a $250 bill she couldn't pay. The humiliation must have been crushing. The grand gesture, the triumphant dinner, had imploded into a pathetic spectacle of her own making. That story was the perfect, sordid end to our 4-year relationship. It wasn't about the money. It was about the exposure. She, who had spent years trying to control my reality, had finally collided with an undeniable reality of her own. Her entire lifestyle, her confidence, her ability to even buy dinner, was built on a foundation that I provided. And with a few clicks, I had taken that foundation away, leaving her to face the consequences of her actions, alone and broke, in the middle of a crowded restaurant. If you've made it this far, I'd love to hear from you what moment in your life made you see someone for who they truly were. Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to Reddit Whispers, where the real stories get told.